Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. I had the craziest and scariest thing happen a few nights ago when I was out doing a haul with my buddy Jake. We're both long-haul truckers and we're driving an overnight route through some sketchy areas. When we saw a young couple stranded on the side of the road, we decided to help them out by offering a ride. But they ended up pulling guns on us and robbing us before vanishing into the night. It was absolutely insane. Jake and I have been trucking partners for years now. We've driven hundreds of thousands of miles together across all 48 lower states. We've seen some interesting characters and situations out there on the open road, but nothing like what we experienced this past week. We were a few hours into an overnight haul, taking turns napping in the back while the other drove. It was around 2 a.m., and we were passing through a pretty remote rural area known for crime when we spotted a young guy and girl sitting off the shoulder of a head, illuminated in the headlights. They looked totally out of place on this desolate stretch of highway, clearly not locals but travelers of some sort. The guy had a battered backpack at his feet while the girl sat perched on an old suitcase. They both wore worn, dusty clothing and had faraway looks in their eyes. Despite the risky situation picking up hitchhikers' poses, Jake and I felt bad just blowing past and leaving them stranded out there in the pitch-dark middle of nowhere. It was cold, and who knew how long they'd been stuck roadside or where they were trying to get to. They both noticeably perked up when we slowed down and pulled over behind them. The couple looked to be in their early 20s as they approached the passenger door. The guy had unkempt hair and several days of stubble, while the girl had long, dingy blonde dreads. They introduced themselves as Alex and Felicity, thanking us profusely in tired voices for stopping to help. They explained how their beat-up old sedan had broken down miles back, and they'd been stuck there waiting for any aid for hours. We asked if they had called for a tow or tried to get repairs, but they said they couldn't afford any of that. They were just trying to make it to the next town over to crash with friends. Alex hauled their tattered bags up into the truck bed while Felicity slid into the back seat. She smelled of body odor and stale cigarette smoke. As we got moving again, they both seemed to relax, clearly relieved to be out of the elements. We tried to chat casually to help them feel at ease, letting our guard down a bit as the miles rolled by. Alex said they were used to getting around by hitchhiking and had been on the road for weeks, relying on the generosity of strangers. They seemed like a pair of lost souls struggling to survive out there. Felicity lamented not having a ride of their own before trailing off into silence, staring out the window at the darkness. We learned they were originally from Florida and had left home as teenagers after turbulent upbringings. It was clear life had been hard on them, judging by their weary demeanors. About 20 minutes later, after we had started to relax and were focused on the dark highway, we suddenly heard the unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked from the back. My blood turned to ice as I looked in the mirror to see both Alex and Felicity pointing pistols at us. They coldly demanded we hand over all our cash right now or else. Adrenaline pumping, we quickly tossed back a couple $100 we had on us. But they yelled that we must have more money and to give them everything. With guns pointed at our heads, we were forced to pull over again and dig out the emergency money we kept stashed in the truck. I'd never seen Jake look so scared as when we handed over the wad of cash to them. As soon as the thieves had the money in hand, they jumped out of the still-moving truck and sprinted off the road into the dense trees lining the highway. We were so shocked we could only sit there panting, trying to process what just happened. Then Jake remembered the shotguns we kept behind our seats in case of situations just like this. Operating on pure adrenaline now, we grabbed the guns, flicked on the high beams, and went chasing after them into the forest. We were not about to let these punks rob us at gunpoint and get away with it. There was no sign of Alex and Felicity in the dark woods, but we kept plunging ahead, yelling that we were armed and to come out now. After 15 minutes of searching without catching sight of them, we finally had to give up. They must have escaped the area completely. Dejected, we returned to the truck to radio the cops and file a report. All that money was gone for good. The cops came and took our statements, but said there was little chance of finding two people who fled into the woods at night unless they turned up dead. We gave the best description we could, but they were just drifters who had played us for fools. Jake and I learned our lesson the hard way. We're far more wary now about who we'd pick up on lonely stretches of highway. It could have ended so much worse too. Those kids could have easily killed us on that desolate road. We bought new shotguns and keep them loaded close now when driving. I still get tense passing near that area, half expecting to see Alex and Felicity lurking by the roadside seeking their next victims. But we won't be fooled again. Our goodwill led to getting robbed, something we'll have to live with. At least Jake and I still have our lives and can move on wiser. The cops may never catch those thieves, but karma will someday. We can only hope they'll think twice before hijacking another truck at gunpoint and preying on decent people's humanity. Jake and I are just grateful we survived the ordeal intact to keep on trucking another day. I still can't believe that crazy, terrifying experience I had last weekend when I got totally lost during a solo hike in the woods. My phone had died earlier, so I had no way to GPS my location, and I ended up taking a ride from a super sketchy truck driver that gave me really eerie vibes. Looking back now, I'm so incredibly grateful I listened to my instincts and managed to get out of that nightmarish situation. It all started out as just a normal Saturday morning hike on a trail I've walked dozens of times before without any issues. It was a gorgeous sunny day, perfect for being out in nature. I was feeling great and took my time wandering down the winding forest path, stopping frequently to admire the massive moss-covered trees and lush ferns. After about an hour of meandering through the woods, I realized nothing around me was looking even remotely familiar. I must have zoned out and taken a wrong fork in the trail at some point. No big deal, I figured. I could just pull out my phone and use a GPS to pinpoint my location again. But when I took my phone out of my pocket, dread washed over me as I pressed the power button and was met with a completely black, unresponsive screen. In my early morning haste to get out on the trail, I had forgotten to plug my phone in to charge the night before. Now the battery was totally dead with no way for me to access maps or call anyone for help. Panic started to rise in my chest as I spun around slowly, scanning the dense sea of trees surrounding me on all sides. I knew these woods well, but everything was unfamiliar. I had wandered off the main trail and was now totally lost with no phone. I aimlessly hiked around for what felt like an eternity, trying in vain to find something I recognized that would give me some idea of where I was. But I just seemed to get more turned around and disoriented as I stumbled through the endless trees. After nearly another hour of fruitlessly retracing my steps over and over, I finally emerged from the thick woods onto a long, straight dirt road. I decided to follow it, hoping it would lead me to a house, business, or any signs of civilization where I could get help and maybe charge my useless phone. I walked quickly down the dusty, isolated road, scanning the woods around me for any indication of houses or buildings. But there was nothing except trees passing me by on both sides. No mailboxes, no side roads, just never-ending forest. After about 15 minutes of walking, I finally heard the rumbling of an approaching engine behind me. I turned and saw a beat-up older model pickup truck bouncing down the rutted road toward me. Relief washed over me at the prospect of finding help, so I waved my arms to flag it down. The truck slowed and pulled up beside me, a cloud of dust enveloping me as it stopped. The driver leaning over to crank down the passenger window looked to be in his 40s, with long, scraggly salt and pepper hair and a few days' worth of scruffy beard growth. He was wearing a faded flannel shirt and ratty jeans. I quickly explained my situation of being lost in the woods after wandering off the trail and having my phone die, so I had no way to call for help. The guy nodded and said he was heading into town just a mile or so down the road and could give me a lift to find a charger. I hesitated for a brief moment since I didn't know this man at all, but considering my limited options out here alone in the woods and the fact that he seemed harmless enough, I decided to go for it. I thanked him sincerely and walked around to hop into the truck's passenger seat. As the man pulled back onto the road to continue toward town, he made casual small talk, asking me what I was doing out hiking alone and if I was new to the area. I kept my responses vague, not offering any details about myself to this total stranger. After driving for about 15 minutes, I noticed we didn't seem to be getting any closer to town. In fact, we were heading deeper into even more rural back roads, totally surrounded by dense forest on both sides now. I definitely did not recognize this area at all. I politely asked the driver if he was sure we were going the right way, since we didn't seem to be nearing any businesses or homes yet. He nodded confidently and insisted a gas station he knew was just around the next bend up ahead. But as the time and mileage stretched on, my anxiety grew. This was clearly not the direction of town. I firmly told the man I was uncomfortable and wanted to be let out immediately, but he just kept staring straight ahead at the winding road, insisting the gas station was just past these trees and we'd be there any minute. My heart started pounding. I was trapped in this moving vehicle with a stranger who was blatantly lying to me. In desperation, I grabbed the door handle and tried to open it, hoping I could safely tuck and roll out. But it was locked tight. The man continued driving steadily deeper into the lonely, isolated woods. I was completely powerless, at the mercy of whatever this creepy liar had planned for me. Suddenly, the truck jerked violently and the engine started sputtering loudly. Steam began pouring from the hood and the whole truck shook wildly. We slowly rolled to a stop as the engine cut out completely dead. The driver swore under his breath, slamming his fist against the steering wheel. He turned the key angrily, but there was no response. It was completely broken down. Fuming, he unlocked his door and got out to check under the smoking hood. As soon as I heard that click of the unlock button, my adrenaline surged. I hastily pushed open my door and leaped out, immediately breaking into a dead sprint down the road away from the disabled truck. I ran faster than I ever have, my lungs burning. I could hear the man shouting after me, but didn't look back. I pumped my arms and continued running full speed down the twisting forest road, my feet pounding the dirt. I ran for what felt like miles until the man's yelling finally faded into silence behind me. Finally, I had to slow to a jog, then collapsed against a tree, wheezing to catch my breath. I had managed to escape the clutches of the creepy driver, but now I was still lost and alone deep in the unfamiliar woods. I don't think I'll be going on any more solo hikes again anytime soon after barely making it out of the terrifying situation I found myself in. This was one lesson in trusting instincts I'll never forget. I had the most bizarre and unsettling experience ever late one night last weekend while driving home alone down an isolated rural highway. I picked up a young female hitchhiker who was crying on the side of the road, but halfway through the drive she mysteriously vanished from right out of my backseat. It scared me half to death, and I still have no rational explanation for what I witnessed. I had been on the road for over 2 hours, returning home after visiting some old college friends who lived a few towns over. It was close to midnight by the time I left, and I had a long dark drive ahead through winding country back roads I wasn't very familiar with. I cracked my window to enjoy the cool night breeze, keeping the music low as I navigated the sharp turns. There were no streetlights on this barren stretch of road, just my headlights cutting through the inky woods passing by on either side. Up ahead, I noticed a lone figure walking slowly along the shoulder of a head, illuminated briefly in my beams. As I cautiously drew nearer, I realized with alarm it was a young girl who appeared to be crying, her eyes red and cheeks glistening with tears in the moonlight. My heart went out to her, alone on this desolate road well past midnight. I debated momentarily, then decided to pull over and see if she needed any help. As my tires crunched the gravel shoulder, she whipped around, seeming frightened. I rolled down my window slowly and called out that I just wanted to make sure she was okay. The girl looked to be college-aged, maybe 19 or 20 years old. She hesitated, eyeing my car warily before hesitantly approaching. I tried to appear as non-threatening as possible, giving her a small, reassuring smile. After a moment, she relayed that she was trying to walk to her friend's house in the next town over, but had gotten lost and had no ride. The poor girl looked so distressed and exhausted. I offered to drive her myself, thinking she shouldn't be alone out here at this hour. Again, the girl paused, contemplating whether to accept a ride from a complete stranger. I understood her uncertainty, but eventually she opened the passenger door and climbed into the backseat. I think we both felt better knowing she wasn't trapped with me out front. As I pulled back onto the dark, tree-lined road, the girl seemed to relax slightly. She said her name was Emily, and she was a sophomore at the nearby university, studying history. In turn, I introduced myself and gave her a quick rundown of what I did for work and where I lived, he being a casual. After a few minutes, Emily opened up more about why she had been so upset walking alone late at night. She shared that she had just gone through a bad breakup with her boyfriend of 2 years. My heart ached for her as she described through tears how painful and messy the whole ordeal had been. I offered any words of comfort and reassurance that I could. Our conversation started flowing more easily after that, and I was glad to see Emily's mood lifting. She had a very sweet, down-to-earth demeanor as she told me all about her family and growing up in a rural Midwestern town much like this one. I quite enjoyed the company, and talking with her helped make this stretch of lonely highway less ominous. But about 20 minutes into the drive, I suddenly realized Emily had gone completely silent. Glancing up into the rearview mirror, I saw with confusion that the back seat was empty. Emily had vanished into thin air. I did a double take, squinting into the mirror. Indeed, the seat was completely vacant. No sign of the girl who had just been in the midst of a pleasant conversation with minutes prior. It was as if she had disappeared right out of the moving vehicle. My chest tightened with unease and I broke into a cold sweat. Where on earth could she have gone? I had been driving steadily the whole time, focusing on the dark road ahead. It made zero logical sense that she could just dematerialize like that. I quickly rolled down both windows and twisted around in my seat, desperately scanning the road behind me to see if I could spot Emily somehow now outside the car. Could she have opened the door and jumped out without me even realizing? But we were surrounded by nothing but dense forest, no buildings or exits anywhere in sight. Thoroughly disturbed by the bizarre and seemingly impossible situation, I slowed the car and pulled over onto the empty shoulder. I had to take a moment to catch my breath and try to process what had just occurred, or seemed to have occurred, since it all felt totally implausible. I stepped out of the car on shaky legs, calling Emily's name loudly into the night, my voice echoing through the trees. No response came except the chirping of crickets. I shone my phone's flashlight beam around, but there was no sign of the girl. No footprints, discarded items. It was like she had never been there at all. My hands trembled as I got back into the driver's seat, completely unnerved but unsure what to even make of this experience. Had I just imagined Emily somehow a projection of an exhausted mind? Or was something far stranger and more inexplicable at play? I drove the remaining stretch home in a daze, continuously glancing back to see if by some miracle she might reappear in the seat. But it remained vacant the whole way. I scored the local news in the following days, but no missing girl matching Emily's description was reported. I never saw her again after that bewildering night, and have no idea what became of her. All I know is the bizarre encounter shook me to my very core, calling into question my perceptions of reality itself. This chilling experience will haunt me and defy all logical explanation for a very long time.
Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.